Welcome to the Firestarter podcast. People, ideas, and conversations that move us forward. I'm your host, Willa Kammerer, and it's my passion, my purpose, and my business to make the world a better place through storytelling, which is why we're here today. We'll talk to mission-driven entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and investors, thought leaders, researchers, and experts on the front lines of the world's most pressing issues about designing and thriving in careers of impact. My guest today is Steve Bradley, Vice President of Cleantech Strategy and Investments at Cox Enterprises. As Vice President of Cleantech, Steve is responsible for building a new business vertical at Cox Enterprises that tackles sustainability challenges and drives profitability, top-line growth, and diversification. Under his leadership, the Cox Cleantech team is investing in solutions that transform key segments of agriculture, energy, and waste to sustainably meet the needs of a rapidly growing global population. Bradley joined Cox in 2001 as an engineer and has spent most of his career exploring new ways for Cox to reach its aggressive conservation goals for waste, water, and energy. He helped launch Cox Conserves in 2007 with a clear vision to drive positive environmental change inside the company, among its stakeholders, and in the community. Part of that vision includes making its operations zero waste to landfill by 2024 and carbon and water neutral by 2034. Bradley is a 2012 graduate of the Institute for Georgia Environmental Leadership Program and holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Mississippi State University. He regularly speaks on environmental panels and serves on the board of Nexus Fuels, a circular plastics company, and Bright Farms, an indoor agriculture company. In addition, Bradley was named to the Atlanta Business Chronicle's Who's Who in Sustainability list. In our conversation, we talk about Steve's leadership in sustainability investments at Cox Enterprises and the evolution of his role over time, how sustainability in business is in the spotlight, and here to stay for good because, as our conversation makes clear, what's good for the planet is good for business over the long term. I so enjoyed my conversation with Steve and can't wait to share it with you today. Welcome to the show, Steve. So thrilled to have you here.
Hey, Willa, thanks for having me. It's so great to talk with you.
Well, thank you. So you're Vice President of Cleantech at Cox Enterprises. And, I think most of us, when we think of Cox, we think of Cox Communications, the narrow lens of internet and cable TV provider. But, as I dug deeper in preparation for our conversation today, I learned that Cox Communications is actually just a division of a parent company, Cox Enterprises, which itself has a really long and fascinating history. Can you share a bit more about the structure of the company and how Cleantech fits into it?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you're right. Most people only know of Cox if you're in one of our markets where Cox Communications is located, because that's the only consumer-facing brand that we have with the Cox name. The story of Cox goes back to the late 1800s when Governor James Cox bought the Dayton Daily News and then started the company by acquiring other newspapers, then moving into radio and then television, ultimately cable TV, and then the automotive sector. And so, right now, the way we're structured is I sit at the parent company, which is Cox Enterprises, which is a holding company for two major divisions, Cox Communications that you mentioned, and then Cox Auto. Cox Auto is a large inventory marketing and sales company. So a lot of dealer-to-dealer transactions and services, but some of the brands that would be more consumer-facing are Kelley Blue Book and Autotrader.com. So where I sit in the company is charged with growing and creating the next divisions of the company that would sit alongside Cox Auto and Cox Communications. And so Cleantech in and of itself is what we call a growth and diversification effort to go make the company bigger, but also to build new divisions in other spaces, and specifically focused in what we call the Cleantech sector, which for me, I define Cleantech as resource efficiency, resiliency, and adaptation.
That's great. Well, I saw Autotrader, but I didn't see Kelley Blue Book. So I think, we've all interfaced with Cox Enterprises more than we think we have. So this is kind of a two-part question. I'd love to for you to walk us through, first your personal story and what led you to Cox, where I understand you started as an engineer back in 2001. And I'm also curious about where your interest and passion for sustainability really took hold, whether that was prior to starting at Cox or something that really evolved during your time there.
Yeah, I think the end of the story is it definitely was catalyzed at Cox. I didn't, the short, I guess the short version is I didn't sort of grow up with this innate desire to combat environmental challenges. While I do think, though, that a lot of things that happened, looking back in sort of the formative years of my life, I could point to those and say, well, I probably was destined down this path, although I just didn't see it at the time. And so I grew up in an area where, I really had a connection with, nature and sort of the natural world, and appreciated sort of the beauty and the pristineness of some of that, and also saw what was happening with pollution, in the form of runoff. I grew up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and so, I remember as a kid looking up the river, going, "Where's all this pollution come from? Where are all these chemicals coming from and trash that's coming down this way?" But I didn't really ever make a connection beyond that, other than thinking, well, okay, if they tell me you're only supposed to eat one of this kind of fish, why would you eat any of them? But that was pretty much the extent of it. Then, as I moved forward and got out of college, I went to work for a big electric utility first, which is really was my original sort of plan in life, is to go. I loved steam turbines and boilers and things like that, and had a degree in mechanical engineering. That didn't really work out. I ended up designing and building the high voltage transmission system for that electric utility. And while it was a great education, it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing, with my life. I sort of consider it my PhD in electrical engineering, but it was just not something I was really excited about doing. And so, I really, when I came to Cox, it was really just the promise of something different. I didn't know the company. I didn't know a whole lot about the company. In fact, I had sort of this funny conversation with my dad at the time. This was in 2001, where I told him I was going to leave and go to work for Cox, and he said, "You're going to leave an investor-owned regulated utility to go work for an internet startup company." And I said, "Dad, they're not an internet startup company. They're 100 years old and they provide the internet." But that was sort of like my view at the time, and my world was pretty limited. And so when I came to Cox, it was really just to be able to. They were leveraging the fact that I did have this background in both mechanical and electrical engineering. There was a guy at Cox that had been doing what he called energy conservation for 20 years before that, and he needed somebody with a little bit more broader skill set that understood newer technology, because they were getting a lot more requests from our field locations in all these different sort of complex things and new technology that was coming out. And that was what I came for. I thought I was going to be doing mechanical electrical engineering for Cox. And shortly after I started, I met Jim Kennedy, who at the time was the CEO at Cox. He's also the grandson of the founder of the company. Um, and he was really the catalyst for me and my passion around sustainability, because he was one that I was able to connect with. He had a very similar passion for nature to mine, and that combined with the fact that he's the CEO of this company and has all these other responsibilities, but yet he keeps the mind space to think about the environment, was really just majorly impactful for me. And then the difference, though, well, there were lots of differences between sort of how Jim and I thought about the world, but he had the vantage point, is sort of how I think about it, of where he was at Cox, how he grew up, to be able to really have seen the changes that were happening in the world, and then connect that with a desire to like fix it or solve it. And that was the minute it sort of clicked for me, and I thought, wow, if it's this important to this person who is such a key figure in a major company, like, I get like it resonates with me what he's trying to do, and I should do that too. And so that was really the powerful influence that started it. And I think there was sort of this final piece that set me off down this path, and that was as we started thinking about sustainability at Cox, and we didn't call it sustainability back in 2001. It's sad. I mean, it was fun. We called it like green programs and energy programs and things
Yeah, a
like
lot
that.
has changed in terms of that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it wasn't even like sustainability wasn't a word we used in the context of the environment back then. I remember Jim, he was getting ready to retire, and he said, "Look, I want the legacy I leave behind from my time at Cox to be that Cox left the world a better place." And that to me was just one of these sort of awe-inspiring moments where you go, this is a guy who doubled the revenue of the company 3 times in 15 years. But what he wants to be remembered for his time at the helm was that he made an impact in the environment. And so, I, as anybody would, that's sort of, this lowly new employee, I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, well, you're the smart guy here. You figure it out and you come tell me. And so whether he did that on purpose or not, I don't know. But you know, that was sort of the final catalyst, was he let me own it and let me go really, internalize it and build it. And so that at that point, I feel like my path was sort of set. And then, 20 years later, here we are. Like, a lot has changed. But we're still doing, that work, and we've even gotten better and accelerated, what we're doing in the space.
Well, what an opportunity to have that coming from, the highest point of leadership in the company, and really to have that, authenticity behind the mission and the work, and the kind of go ahead to follow your own path with it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. It's a lot different. I always think about, there's, when I went to Cox, and now of course, I've never looked back to have, our stakeholders, in the form of the family who owns the company, and how they think about their employees, and how they think about, their mission in life and the mission of the company. It's real, and when you see what effort and what really financial backing that they've put behind it over the years, it really makes people into a believer. And I think that's been a big deal for our employees, because we needed our employees to get behind what we were doing if we were going to solve some of these problems. But we needed them to believe in it. And you can't go just educate people to the point where they believe in something. You have to, be a leader. And Jim was definitely that leader.
Yeah, there has to be the why behind it. So, throughout your time since then, it seems like you've really taken a leadership role in driving the positive environmental change, both inside and outside of the company. Can you talk about some of those key initiatives and, the company's sustainability program, Cox Conserves, and any broader sustainability goals?
Yeah. I'll probably start at the beginning and go through it, because I think, when I'm talking to other folks, especially investors in the space, who might say, why in the world are you guys investing and buying companies in sustainable agriculture or something like that? I always have to back up and say, well, let me tell you the story here of how we got here, and hopefully then it'll make sense. So whenever we built Cox Conserves originally, um, there was really one thing we were focused on, as a measurable, tangible goal, and that was energy. It's what I knew. It was our second largest expense, because we were a services company, and so that's where we started. And we had, a 20% energy reduction goal, and that was great back then. But when you fast forwarded into 2011, 2010, 2011, I realized that, all of a sudden sustainability was a thing. We needed to continue to evolve our program to be a leader and honor Jim's legacy. And so we made a big change then, which was to create date certain neutral goals in carbon, water, and waste. And the reason we did that is I wanted to make sure that we were really like an energy reduction goal wasn't like fundamentally changing our business. I could do that, and the company could just do what they were doing. It really wasn't, drastically changing the company. I wanted to have a program in place that really fundamentally forced us to think about the environment in every decision we made, and also thought it's really like, how do we honor Jim's legacy? Let's eliminate our impact, on the planet. And so those goals are now, waste neutral by 2024 and carbon and water neutral by 2034. And the reason I think it's important to start with those goals is that's what led us into Cleantech ultimately. And the reason why was, if you now fast forward to, call it 2 or 3 years ago, Alex Taylor is now our CEO. He's the great grandson of the founder, and Alex had a very clear vision for what he wanted to do with Cox, which was to put us back into growth mode, and which is great and exciting for the company. But as I started thinking about that, I thought, wow, we have to figure out how to address a growing company with date certain neutral environmental goals. And the way that we went about solving that was, we thought about the idea of, what if we drive a certain portion of that growth by diversifying into what we were calling, back then I think I called it sustainability, but now we've named it Cleantech. Then, like, the impact we could have there, and this was a thesis in the early days, we theorized we could have such a greater impact by building a meaningful business in the space, way beyond anything we could do by eliminating our environmental impact as a company. And so we added that as an additional thing that we were going to try to solve. And so we'll continue to eliminate Cox's impact, but if we're successful in building the next division of the company in this space, it's going to have, I like to think of it as, Cox will always do the right thing, but at the end of the day, eliminating Cox's footprint, it's not going to change the trajectory of the planet in any way. Now, we like to influence people and show other people we can do it, but if we can build a meaningful business here, that can truly like have a positive change on the way the planet's going.
Yeah, that makes sense. So not just reduce, but kind of create something additive and beneficial.
That's right.
So, that kind of leads into the next thought and question. What are some of the, challenges and opportunities tackling sustainability issues within the framework of a large corporation? Because I know that also gives you this amazing platform to be able to do more.
That's right. Yeah, and I think it's figuring out where to start. That for us was was a challenge in and of itself. As I thought about the clean tech space, you can put a lot of stuff into clean tech. I think, in fact, when we started looking at total addressable market, I want to say it was $437 trillion, in that total addressable market. And the first thing I said was, okay, we got to really cut this down. We will not be successful if we just go surface level across all these opportunities. And so at the time, it was just me. And so I was able to pull all of our strategy resources from the divisions to come in and help. And we went through the whole space and said, okay, let's do like sort of this tops down, bottoms up approach to cut these sectors and figure out what sectors, from a financial standpoint, look interesting. Where's the growth pockets at? What sectors can we leverage some of Cox's core competencies to be able to be successful in there? And I'll talk more about that in a second. And then what sectors, offer the biggest impact that we could create? Because we don't want to go like, if you think about all these sectors as a piece, like a pie, we don't want to go after like the smallest piece of pie. And so, when I talking about the core competencies, the first thing we had to do was really reframe what are our core competencies, because everybody said, well, this is diversification. We have no core competencies in agriculture, so you can't do that. And so we had to get really creative. And so this was another challenge in how we think about that. I look at the way we're growing food now. It's a systems-based approach with technology and operation. Like, we're good at that. That's what Cox does well. And so you have to really dig down a little bit into those core competencies, because it's easy to say, well, we don't know how to do that. And so, that sort of was the first thing. And, you know, then it really just comes down to a compelling reason to do it. I think there's a lot of, it's easy, like I call it inertia. It's easy to just keep doing what you're doing. Nobody gets in trouble for that. You have to be willing to really push the bounds. You have to be provocative and make people uncomfortable. I tend to take the tack of, I have to show people why we can't not do this. And so that's, I think I always like to be elegant in solutions, but sometimes it just takes brute force to get things through. So I think stubbornness or tenacity, if you want to be positive about it, is what it takes sometime. And then the last thing was just, and I was lucky that we had built this over years and years, the credibility of being able to prove that sustainability created competitive advantage. And so that for me was key, was building all of this on that foundation. If we'd have started this ground zero, I just don't think I would have been able to get the traction and success like we have, knowing that we have, a couple of, I don't know, at least over a decade of documented experience in proving that what we've done has really been good for our business.
Yeah, in preparing for our conversation today and reading through, the different materials on Cleantech and Cox Enterprises, yeah, I definitely came across the words profitability and sustainability quite a few times in the same sentence. Could you dig a little more deeply into that? How what's good for the environment can also really be good for business?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I probably say that in my sleep, because when we started, what I wanted to prove was that I could go do good things for the planet and bring back the best returns of anybody in the company. Like, if you want to go, get more money than you can invest, that's how you do it. And so I was very rigorous about that in the beginning, especially, and we drove really good returns for the company. I think about sustainability in terms of, especially for Cox, like, I want to build a durable business that's around for another 120 years. And that to me is what sustainability is. And it has to be at that balance between profit and planet if you want it to work long term. There's room for philanthropy, and we have a foundation and they do a lot of good stuff. My focus has always been on the business side and creating that sort of sustainable program. And so that's the reason I've always had that focus, and the reason that we were successful in getting to the point where we almost had unlimited amounts of money that we were wanting to put to work, because we were doing all these great things that we could quantify in benefits. And then I have all this other, there's things you just can't quantify. There are people related things. How do you quantify the fact that you're a workplace where you get the best talent because people buy into your vision and your dream and your why of what you want to do with this company? And so we just sort of put those as, the oh, by the ways. But we always have to quantify, the benefits in hard terms. And so, almost $1 billion later that we've invested under my tenure, I don't manage the Cox Conserves program anymore, but I'd still be willing to bet today that the returns on that investment would be impressive to any investor out there.
Yeah. It seems like up till now, up till maybe the last decade, creating positive environmental impact has seemed like more of a secondary initiative in business. Like, profits are generated, on the business side, and then, giving through the corporate social responsibility programs or other initiatives. Looking beyond Cox to the broader corporate landscape, do you think that that's changing? That it started that sustainability and environmentalist interests are starting to be more embedded into the operations of businesses themselves?
Yeah, for sure. And it is there is an acceleration here. We're seeing, and I get to see this now on the the business side of things. But we figured this out, going 20 years ago. that this sustainable thinking would you could build a better company. But what I'm seeing now is companies are really shifting from being focused on profit for their shareholders, call it, to being focused on their stakeholders, and meaning that whether or not, like, we were doing it way back then because we believed it was the right thing to do, and other companies are as well. But now I think you're seeing is this almost insurmountable pressure that's coming from all these stakeholders, whether it be investors, consumers, employees. And so I think what we've seen now is just a complete holistic set of drivers where no matter what your motivation is as a company, you've got to do this. And so I don't think of this as being, I look at this as being really the compliance of the future. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it gets there.
Yeah, it's probably easier for businesses to start thinking about it now so they're not scrambling.
That's right.
What is the power do you see and responsibility of businesses to help address some of our most pressing environmental issues? And do you think that businesses can solve these issues alone, or?
I definitely think it's businesses' responsibility, and businesses have the most power to do it. There was I think there was a quote from Mayor Jackson. I'll mess it up, from long ago, but it was something to the effect of, like, private enterprises can feed more hungry, clothe more poor, than governments ever could. And like, that's the way I think about it too, is that not only do private enterprises have this capability to do this, I think they also have a responsibility, because companies have been built on, and not, I don't want this to seem negative. I mean, it's the exploitation of natural resources. Like, we as a society have built wealth off of our natural resources, and it's done. But now I think there's this onus to go back and just do it better. If you can do it, but if you can just do it a better way, I think that's what we are to be always asking ourselves. I don't think we can do it, alone. I think it has to be a joint effort, but I definitely don't think we need, government entities or NGOs. Like, some might need that, but I think businesses should take the lead and just go do this for all the right reasons. And the other reason I think we should do this is because there's a huge opportunity if you get out in front of this and do it right, and don't wait on somebody to regulate you, or somebody to force you to do it. I think there's a huge opportunity, and that's why I think about framing Cleantech in the three areas of resource efficiency, adaptation, and resiliency. Using less resources is good for your business. But there's also, like, the adaptation and resiliency is an acknowledgement that the world's going to change, and you need durable businesses that can withstand that change. And those are the ones that are going to be successful and profitable into the future.
Yeah, and the businesses, of the next century can't be built on the same model of exploitation, because back to the sustainability perspective, it's just not going to be sustainable for another century. So
that's right.
Well, I think this is a good moment to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Here at Firestarter Interactive, we're proud members of the 1% for the Planet network of businesses, having made the commitment to donate 1% of annual revenue to environmental causes. So for every dollar that we earn, 1 cent goes back to planet Earth and our mission to make the world a greener, healthier place for our generation and for future generations. That's $1 of every $100, $10 of every 1,000. It may not sound like a lot, but every dollar adds up. And collectively, we can and are making a huge impact, with 1% for the Planet members giving back more than $280 million and counting to the environment. Visit 1%fortheplanet.org. That's 1% for the planet, all spelled out, to learn more. We hope you'll join us. And we're back. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and dig deeper into your personal story and what drives you. How do you relate to this idea of connecting with your why and living your purpose? Does that resonate with you in what you're doing?
It does. I'm very fortunate that, you know, among all the other great things about Cox and the culture of the company, Cox is a place where they take risks on good people. And what I mean by that is, if you on paper, I was not the right person to go build the next division of the company. There are people that had private equity backgrounds or investment banking backgrounds, but at Cox, they give people that they believe in the chance to go succeed. And so because of that mentality and that culture, I've been able to go build, a career that fits my why or fits my purpose. And so, you know, to me, that's what makes what I do really fun, is that I get to design, things that I'm passionate about. And we always talk about building a better future for the next generation. I tend to internalize that and think about, I have a 14-year-old son, and I think about that in terms of, leaving resources in a natural environment, that he will get to enjoy and his children will possibly get to enjoy, versus leaving them with a big problem that they get to deal with. And so that's sort of how I think about it, and I'm very fortunate that I get to live that every day.
Yeah, definitely. Seems like it's far more than a job title for you. And I think part of that comes down to having that ownership, and really being able to evolve it and take a leadership role yourself rather than, kind of following paint by the numbers, someone else's vision. What advice would you have for young people, maybe your son, or also someone, maybe at a career juncture, seeking more meaning and impact in their work, on how to connect with a pathway and a vocation that resonates with them, but also, feels like they're making a positive impact?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great question, because I get asked this a lot by our employees, who, when are always what we do, and it's always like, it's very rewarding when people want to be associated with what you're doing. And so usually that manifests in, how can I participate? How can I help? What can I do? And so what I always tell people is, you know, make your job fit your passion if you can. I mean, there are certain situations where, like I was at the power company, you're just not in the right job for you. But there are always things you can do that you can sort of like weave in your passion into your job. If you can't, you probably need to find something else that you want to do. There, the old adages about, various things. I always tend to say differently. I just say, like, when this quits being fun, I'm going to go find something else to do. And because life is just too short. We spend a lot of time, now that we're remote, it even is more exacerbated of how much time we spend doing our work every day. And if you don't enjoy that, I don't know how you can trudge through 30, 40 years of your life if you're not excited and passionate about what you do. So you either got to find the passion, can build the job into what you want it or go to be, or go find something else to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective, because I think just that, that you can layer and incorporate different things that will make something, your current role more meaningful. But then if you don't have that flexibility, then seek elsewhere. Are there particular mindsets or philosophies that you bring to your life and work that have been important to your success?
I think I always I've always liked the idea of, of sort of the dare to be curious. I think that to me is really a lot of what I do. At the end of the day, now that I'm doing investments and building companies, I spend most of my time asking questions. And that I've found is the most important skill set to have, is to, if you can get to the right questions, that's great. But you've just got to ask questions and sort of be provocative to get to the right, what's the answer? And that's all it really is to it. And then beyond that, I think it's just sheer determination, because there are times when I feel like the effort is isometric, and you just got to keep pushing. And you know there are sort of points where I just say, we're going to get this done no matter what it takes, because things are just, it's not always easy. And building a business, doing diversification, like for me, in my example, is sort of how I think about it. It's not something easy to do, because of that inertia that you have. It's just easier to keep doing what you were doing before. And so I sort of feel like, my days are spent as much as a change agent as anything else, to convince people that this is the path we need to go down, and this is a really good idea. And so, call it half change agent, half salesperson.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. The pathway is often just a lot of hard work too. It's not always glamorous, but I think we often see the kind of more glamorous end result, but the pathway to get there, is long often.
That's right. That is actually a really good point, because I think if you read press releases, or you always get the positive side of things. It's the Christmas letter version of life. And behind, I always sort of joke that we'll have a press release about an investment or an acquisition, and the first thing, if you're on the outside looking in, you think, oh, they're popping champagne and celebrating, and at that point you think, wow, we're excited, but just want to go take a nap maybe, because
Definitely.
of all the hard work that went into it.
Yeah, definitely. What do you know at this point in life to be true? That you wish you'd known at an earlier stage in life.
Oh gosh.
True and
You know,
important.
yeah, I don't know, honestly, I don't know. I think there were probably 99 scenarios that took me down a completely different path, and there was one that led me to where I am today. And I honestly don't know if I knew anything else, like if I knew anything back then, that I knew today, that it would have helped me in any way. I sort of look at this path that I've taken, and it was not really planned. Um, but it was very methodical, and I don't know that I could have gotten there another way. I think, if you went way back, I probably would have, told my younger self, you probably ought to work harder, and screw off a little bit less. I think maybe the other thing, and this would be more for somebody that's coming up in their career, is, you know, and I tell people this now, and probably much to their parents' chagrin, um, go take a risk. When you're early in your career, that's the time to go take a risk. When you don't have the responsibility of kids and things like that, that's when you should go work for a startup, or go do something you're passionate about. Who knows? It might lead to something that becomes, a long-term career to you. But I sort of started my career as, like modeled after, my baby boomer parents, which was go get a steady job, get a house, get married, settle down. And that's probably the one thing that I would say, like, if I was talking to myself back then, I would have said, look, you got plenty of time to do that. Who knows where you might go if you go start your own company or go work for a startup.
And I think that comes back to the follow your curiosity and be curious. If you follow that, you'll probably land somewhere close to your passion, and who knows where it'll lead.
Yep.
So it's March 11th right now. I think it's 1 year, since the WHO declared a pandemic. It's obviously been a very dynamic year. Have current circumstances led to any changes in strategy or focus in your work with Cleantech?
No changes in strategy or focus. It's led to a lot of work. I think so. When everything first broke out, we all thought, okay, this is going to be really interesting how this plays out from a business standpoint. There are going to be companies without liquidity that are going to be struggling. Maybe there's going to be some opportunities, which led us to do a lot of work and a lot of long hours to try to get ready. to it, just in case there were opportunities that came out. And what I learned after about 3 months is there were businesses on two ends of that spectrum. One was businesses that did have resiliency and did well, and the valuations went up and up. And then there were businesses on the other end of the spectrum that didn't do well, and you just wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. And so that really didn't come to fruition how we thought it would. But there was sort of this second thing, and I think for us, I guess at the end of the day, it didn't change anything with these higher valuations. It's great for our portfolio companies because most all of them did very well and are doing very well, during the pandemic. But it obviously makes it a challenge if you're going to go acquire new businesses or invest because of the premiums there. But one of the things that sets us apart at Cox versus what I'll call financial investors or financial sponsors is we take a generational mentality on investments. We like when I have to describe Cox to investors, I say think of a private equity firm that has a very long hold period. That's what we are at Cox Enterprises. We sold off our media business. I don't know, 100 years after we got started, 120 years after we got started. So that's one of the things that really sets us apart is our patient capital. And so when you think about these higher valuations, it's okay. I mean, we still need to be smart with our money, but I think that gives us potentially an advantage over somebody that thinks in terms of a 3-year horizon or quarterly performance and things like that. The second thing I saw is that just this interesting. I don't know if event horizon is not the right sort of way to think about it. ESG is here to stay. It is very obvious to me now, after the pandemic, like it's here. Like it's not a matter of like when's this going to happen. There's a massive desire for ESG businesses, and people are putting their money where their heart is. And that in turn is putting really high premiums on ESG businesses as well. And so, that again it's great if you're an owner of these businesses. It's tougher if you're an investor trying to get in these businesses. So not a shift in strategy, but just I think some interesting things that I've seen that have just been accelerated because of this hyper focus on the types of businesses that are being successful in today's world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's kind of provided this just different space for reflection as we've all, had our routines change. I'd love to dig a little deeper into, some of the specific projects and programs that, you're working on that you're most excited about.
Yeah, so maybe I'll talk about two of them that I'm really excited about right now, and it's always tough, to pick favorite children.
Right.
But
Right.
The first is we have several investments in sustainable agriculture. One specific area is what we call controlled environment agriculture. So this is growing produce in advanced greenhouses, where you control all of the conditions and the environment in there. Why I'm excited about the business is first, it goes back to this resiliency and adaptation. You're decoupling the growing of these things from like arbitrary geographies that are only the weather is good, but nothing else is good about that place. You're able to then locate it closer to people, where people are. And so, the net result of that is, 80% less water, 90% less land, almost like all less transportation fuels. But that's only half the story, because, the thing that convinced me to invest in Bright Farms, which is our leafy greens controlled environment agriculture company, beyond all the sustainability metrics and the excitement that we had around the tailwinds for locally grown controlled environment leafy greens, is it just tastes better. When I went up and met with them, I'm not particular, like I eat spinach because I know it's good for me, not because it's like the most favorite thing that I enjoy in the world, but I caught myself eating straight out of the box, like as a snack, like it was potato chips or something. And that's when I went, okay, we've got something here. We've got something that, it doesn't have any pesticides or herbicides. You don't even have to wash it because it never sees any dirt, and you want to eat it. Like this is crazy. And so to me, that's the perfect example of how you do this in a way that sort of manages, the planet, the people, and the profit. And I'm excited that we're currently we made an announcement late last year of a big investment where we took control of that company, and now we're working to scale that business up. So I'm really excited about what they're going to do. The other area is in waste to X, which is the word. I'm pretty sure we made this up, but I hear other people using it now. We started out in like waste to energy, and then said, well, because energy was the only thing you could do with waste at one point, other than bury it in a hole in the ground. And I wanted to find other things we could do with garbage. And we changed it to waste to X because we figured out there were some other business models that made a lot more sense, and I liked a lot better from an environmental standpoint than waste to energy. And so, one of the solutions, and we actually took a controlling stake in this company as well, is Nexus, and they're located here in Atlanta. Nexus they call themselves a chemical recycler of plastics. And what that means is that they can take currently unrecyclable plastics. So right now, and most people don't know this, this is one of the things that waste. I'm so passionate about trying to do something different with waste. Most people don't realize that 90% of plastics are not recycled. You know, basically, when you put all your recycling in the bin, they pull out the milk jugs and a couple things they want, and the rest of it hopefully goes in a landfill. But a lot of it ends up in rivers and oceans and things like that. And it's because it doesn't make any sense, to recycle those plastics in the traditional ways and technology that they had. Nexus is able to take these previously unrecyclable plastics and do it in a way that they can go back into new plastics manufacturing as virgin materials, and it can be done an infinite number of times. And so you're keeping the plastic, in the economy versus it going anywhere else. And so really exciting. We've worked on this technology. I've been affiliated with this company since 2015. And we've been under the radar perfecting the technology and getting it right. And we just made an announcement yesterday about a big investment to scale this business up because we got the technology nailed. We've got some really good offtake agreements for manufacturers, and so now's the time that we're really going public with this. And they are the most advanced technology of anybody I've ever seen in the space. In fact, just because we've been under the radar, they've processed over 1,000 tons of waste plastic already. So this is not like an early stage lab scale thing. And so that's really exciting to me because this is a company that has the ability to prevent hundreds of thousands of tons of plastics from ending up somewhere that you don't want them to be. And the foundation at Cox paid for some equipment for University of Georgia, and this is what really like brought it home for me. They were studying some baby sea turtles that had ingested plastic and died. And I mean, it's a terrible story, but it's only half the story. The other half is that they are now finding the microplastics in tissue and organs and things like that. It's everywhere. And so what we've got to do is figure out a way, and we can't turn the spigot off overnight. So we've got to figure out a way to keep this stuff in the economy in a profitable way. And that's what Nexus is able to do. And that's what gets me really excited about their business.
Well, I look forward to seeing the developments with both those initiatives and hope that one of those greenhouses pops up right in our neighborhood here.
Yeah, there's one, let's see, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Virginia, and we're building one in North Carolina currently. And then I expect you'll hear some really exciting, some other announcements coming throughout the year of new ones.
Good. Well, putting a little word in for Rhode Island. I know we're not the biggest market in the country, but
Yep.
On a personal level, what are your hopes for this planet, and how we inhabit it in the next decade and well beyond that?
Yeah, I think to me, it just comes down to, we all have the ability and the choice to do better. And that's to me, like, that's my hope, is that, we as humans can embrace rational thinking to solve these issues, you know, versus just the like polarization that seems to really paralyze everybody, and it just stymies any progress. I went back when I was first starting um, my sustainability work. I knew that we had to engage our employees, and interestingly enough, I wanted to figure out, how can we change the culture of our employees at Cox to embrace sustainability. And I didn't know if they did or didn't. I just wanted to make sure we put a program in place that actually made a difference. And there was a doctor at Emory who had done her research on why people engaged in sustainable behavior. And talk about finding your passion. She originally was researching why people voted the way they did, and she said, "This sucks. I hated it. It's just terrible." And so anyway, so I got to spend some time with her, and it really developed my thinking around, you know, the aspect of like human behavior. And what she told me stuck with me, which is, when the human mind is hit with something that's like too big to solve, it does like a couple different things. One is like, it just sort of shuts down and ignore, like, oh, that's not real. You say it's not. The other is, you just say, well, it's too big for me. I can't do anything, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And so, like, that's the part I think about. If we can just do like a little thing and then do another little thing, it adds up. I mean, that's sort of how I think about all the stuff that we've done at Cox. We started with little things and we just kept adding on to it. And honestly, 20 years later, we've done so much, but I still feel like we're just getting started. And so that'd be my hope. I mean, we're really just temporary stewards here. And if everybody could, put everything else aside and just say, if there's a better way to do this, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point too, with like the overwhelm. It just seems like there are just so many, environmental issues, and how can, I, as one small person, change or move the needle on it. So, just the overwhelm of where to start. Do you have any kind of, tips, advice for, people who are trying to, make a difference in their own communities' day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think it honestly comes back to just do something, no matter how small it is. Do something different. Make a habit out of something, and this goes back to sort of the cultural change piece of it. If you can do something like 5 times, I think you create a habit. And so it could be, recycling something that you weren't recycling before. It could be just changing some little behavior. You don't have to go out and solve, the world's oceans plastics problem. I mean, it'd be fantastic if somebody has that motivation and drive. But for a lot of people, it just gets overwhelming and daunting if you think about it in totality. So you just need to, like, just do one thing. Pick one thing that you think you could do differently and do that. And then once you do that, like, find the next thing and just keep building on that and create some momentum.
And I think the more, individuals, businesses do that, then there's the modeling, and hopefully, there's momentum and it kind of snowballs, and, the movement grows as well.
Yep.
And it doesn't hurt, when others see that there's, often some profitability tied with those good decisions as well.
That's right. Well, it also makes you feel better, right, about yourself. If it's feedback. Like our brains, process feedback, as long as it's like not bad. If it's positive feedback, hey, good job, you recycled this much stuff. Like, that's the equivalent of in your adult brain is giving a little kid an ice cream cone. And so it makes you feel good about yourself, and that makes you do more. But you have to take that first step. Like whether it could be like exercise is the same thing. You just have to do that first step. And then I think what you find is that it's a very rewarding thing to do, and will lead to you doing more things.
Yeah. Before we sign off, are there any final reflections you want to share with our listeners on business, sustainability, life?
Gosh, I think, I think I would go back to the fact that, I count myself very lucky to be in a place where I've been able to build my career into my passion. And I think that would probably be, if I was sharing one thing, it would be do that, live your life towards your passion, make your job or your career be your passion. You should always be trying to enjoy what you're doing, whether it be work, life. I mean, I kind of think it all blends together. And so you just have to make the whole thing something that you really enjoy doing. At the end of the day, you're going to end up doing more. You're going to be more productive, and you're going to be a lot happier and feel better about what you're doing.
Well, I don't think we can really top that. So, well, thank you so much, Steve, for this conversation. It's been really, thought-provoking, inspiring. How can our listeners connect with you and learn more about all the great work underway with Cox Cleantech?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for having me first. Love the questions. It's a lot of fun to tell the story too. I'm on LinkedIn on Stephen Bradley at Cox. You can go to coxenterprises.com/cleantech and learn more about what we're doing, as well as, there's links there to reach out and get in touch with us. So I would encourage people to go there and check it out.
Well, I look forward to, watching how everything continues to evolve for the next century. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing another episode of the Firestarter podcast, people, ideas, and conversations that move us forward. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, as well as the video of today's show at firestarterix.com/podcast. That's firestarterix.com/podcast. Connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Willa Kammerer, that's Kammerer, and at FirestarterIX, and I'm Willa Kammerer on LinkedIn. This is the Firestarter podcast. I'm your host, Willa Kammerer, and I can't wait to share our next conversation. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and let's stay busy making the world a better place.